So this morning's conversation for me is going to be driving business outcomes with people analytics. And that is, how do we make an impact on the business? How do we give them something that they want and need? It's not about us in HR or in people analytics. It's about the business. And the more impact we can have, the more value we bring, the more investment we're going to get from our business. And I fully appreciate, just starting off, that in the room, we have a lot of different organizations represented. And you might be at different stages of your analytics journey and different levels of maturity, if you will. But my hope is that everyone in the audience will be able to walk away with something of value, some idea, something that you might be able to take back and apply. But again, just kind of appreciating that everyone's at a little bit of a different level, and we're all trying to figure this out as we go along. So as we get started here, I wanted to tee up my friend Jordan. My friend Jordan runs a people analytics shop for a large retail organization. The people analytics team is well established. They have great talent, great tools. They're able to deliver those reports, dashboards on a regular basis, on time, every time. And the CHRO calls up Jordan and says, we've been having a turnover challenge at the stores. It's been going on for 18 months. We need to tackle this. We need to get on top of this. We need to figure out what's going on. And so Jordan's team springs into action, and wow, they pull the data together. They build out the analyses. They present findings to the CHRO, and the CHRO looks at those findings and says, wow, these are great, but you're telling me where the turnover is high. You're telling me who's leaving, but you're not really answering the call to what to the challenge that I really have, which is, why are these folks leaving, and what are we going to do about it? At the end of the day, that's what the business wants to know. What do I need to do about this? So by way of introduction, obviously, I'm Steve Hall. I spend a lot of time talking with people analytics teams who are looking to take that next step, who are looking to figure out, how do we do people analytics faster, better, at scale? And we have a lot of those conversations. I've also, prior to being in this role at One Model, was a people analytics leader. So I had that struggle of the CHRO coming to me with questions and wanting me to do things like predict turnover for the next 12 months and what's going to happen month by month and things of that nature. Now, prior to that, I did all things talent management and organizational research at a large organization. And that was a lot of fun, trying to figure out, we did stuff over here, what was the impact over here? Because the business was very focused on, if we're going to invest in training or learning or policy changes, we want to know how this changes the business. My background is in industrial organizational psychology, and I mention that because you're going to see some themes popping out, I think, that's like, wow, Steve's a little bit strange. But in any event, just keeping that in mind. One of the other themes that is going to pop out during our conversation that I'd like you to kind of have your antenna up for is becoming more insight-driven. Looking at the people analytics world through the lens of, how do I drive insights, and then how can the business use that? As people analytics leaders, we are challenged by our leadership teams. They want, metrics. They want us to show KPIs. They want us to build monthly reports. They want us to have dashboards that everybody can get into. They want us to do predictive analytics. They want us to tell them the future. And now, obviously, they're probably also saying, can't AI do all of this? You have AI now. Can't you just click a button and magical things happen? So that's the landscape that we are working in and we're faced with. But at the underlying kind of level of things, what does the business really want? Even beyond the CHRO, what do they really want? They want to know what they can do to get more impact. Whatever it is that the business is chasing after, that's what they want more of. They want us to help them do that at speed and scale. So the conundrum is, how do we go from all that data that we're sitting on, and hopefully you're sitting on a lot of data, how do we go from that to driving business impact or supporting business impact? What do we need to be doing there? That's a major challenge that we have. How do we move beyond that basic reporting and the KPIs and into, oh my goodness, if we only did this, like sales would double, or we would see engagement skyrocket, things of that nature. More recently, I've heard a lot of our prospects talking about they want to deliver more insights to managers. And I think that's a good thing. Will driving insights to managers automatically produce impact? I hear some giggling. Yeah, so that could be an indication of maybe not automatically. What I would say is that impact is going to come through design. It's going to come through intentionality. It's not going to fall out of the sky. We're going to have data and reporting. Those are elements that certainly people analytics teams are very familiar with. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, different organizations are at a different place in the relationship with data and reporting. Some have it very well down, that's automated, they have great tools and processes. Others, not so much, still pulling data manually, getting reports out based on that. We know that to have value, we need to drive some insights and some actions. Insights are where we're uncovering patterns. We're discovering, oh, this tends to lead to that. And then we might be able to suggest action to our business partners and say, do something about it. Now, sometimes our business partners are asking us, what can we do? And that's probably, believe it or not, a great place to be, because if people are wanting that from you, then they're going to support you in efforts to give them those insights. And then finally, what we're hoping for is impact. This is the desired outcome. And it's not through our eyes that we measure impact. It's through the lens of the organization and what they care about. So when you summarize it, we provide this as people analytics teams. We're very comfortable with this. We assume that stuff is going on. Now, again, I appreciate the fact that some organizations are really doing a lot to drive insights, but a lot of times we kind of just assume that if we show managers dashboards that, oh, they're going to, get these insights and then they're going to translate into action. And what we want is there on the end, that impact. That's what we're going to be ultimately evaluated on. We add value when we can add impact, right? When we can drive that impact. So how do we get to that impact? Well, start with the end in mind. And that's not my phrase. Our goal is to have impact, but not just any impact. That's the other thing that I really want to emphasize. It's impact on the issues and the topics that the business cares about. We might have ideas about what we think is important. And sometimes as a researcher, and I did a lot of organizational research, I would go down the rabbit hole of things that I wanted to study. But at the end of the day, it's all about what the business wants, what they care about. If we drive insights on the wrong issues, have we created any value? Are people going to come out of the woodwork and go, oh my gosh, they answered the question of, if how many tiles in the store relate to customer satisfaction or something like that, right? No, they want us to focus on things that they care about and ideally things that they can do something about. We need to start with the end in mind. What is it that they need? So what is the business goal? As we progress along this kind of framework of trying to drive impact, what is the goal that they're trying to get at? For your organization, it might be stock price. It could be bottom line figures. It could be safety, brand reputation. There might be an initiative to drive employee engagement. There might be an initiative to reduce turnover. Identifying what the business really cares about and what their goals are isn't always an easy thing to do, but I'll recommend real quickly 3 things that you can do to figure out what those goals are. And the first is talk to people outside of HR. Establish some relationships in those verticals that are not HR. Have conversations and just ask those folks, what are you struggling with? What are you doing? What's important? The next is look at your company's annual report. This is especially relatively easy to do if you're a publicly traded company. But at the end of the day, there's probably some sort of annual report where the CEO and the C-suite has put together, this is what we're trying to do, this is where our challenges are, this is what we're focused on. And then number 3 is take a look at what your company is measuring for the purposes of rewarding financially your leaders. Whatever the leaders are getting bonused on, that's a good indicator that that's something that the company cares about. Once we identify those business goals, what are we going to do with that information? We need to frame it as a question and ideally frame it as a testable question. Why? Because when we have a testable question, we can really leverage our data to get those deeper insights. For example, which locations have the best customer satisfaction scores and why? What's the difference between people who choose to stay and the people who choose to leave? In other words, why are people leaving? Why are people staying? Why do accidents occur? So again, it's asking that testable question and really getting focused on the why. If you can't explain the why, then it's hard for the business to take an action that's going to have a real impact. So how do we bridge that gap between the data that we have and the impact that matters? It's all around the questions and using those questions to deliver insights. So we have on the left side our business outcomes, or business questions, excuse me. That will help us form an evaluation plan. So again, intentionality. Given that we have this question, how am I going to go about answering this question? What data do I need? Do I need to focus on certain groups and exclude others? What am I going to measure? Are those measures reasonable? Will people agree with those measures? Then we can plan out our analyses. What am I comparing? What am I looking for? Do I need to do, something a little bit more advanced, or will a more simple evaluation approach work in this instance? We then apply reasoning. We look at what the data are saying and let the data drive the conclusions that we're going to draw. And one of the most, I think, important things that we can do before we draw a conclusion based on looking at data is ask ourselves, is there another plausible explanation for what I'm seeing here? What else might explain the pattern of relationships I'm seeing? I'm coming up with a conclusion and I'm going to say, my insight is XYZ. Is there another explanation to what's been going on? We need to rule those out. So once we have the insight, hopefully it's actionable. We don't always control whether or not the insight itself is going to be actionable. It kind of depends on what the data tells us. It's this process that's going to lead to good outcomes. Insights are produced. They're not displayed. Don't assume that when we show something to people that they draw correct conclusions. Insights require reasoning, not just rendering. There's a process to developing an insight and making sure it's a good insight. If we're wrong with our insights, we're going to lose credibility pretty quickly. Insights have value when they address questions and support action. Sometimes you do everything right and you get a good insight. It's just not actionable. And that's the way it goes. But a lot of times, hopefully, we're creating insights that the business can and will do something about. Our primary role as people analytics teams, in my view, is to deliver those insights. But a lot of times we get bogged down in tactical stuff. Insight generation is going to take time, thought, energy, resources. It's going to require collaboration. We need to be able to generate those insights fairly quickly because business leaders will make decisions whether or not we show up with data. They're going to make it. They're not waiting for us. And that's part of the challenge. If we're bogged down in the tactical stuff, that reporting and managing dashboards and answering ad hoc requests, we're not going to be able to pivot quickly enough to get those insights to the business in a timely manner. It requires planning, intentionality, preparation. Hopefully, we're identifying that action that's going to make a difference. Now, we might be left out of the action plan. If you give somebody a great insight that is actionable and the business chooses not to do anything with it, I would probably make note of that, figure out why, and avoid that situation in the future. But the bottom line is, we're not necessarily responsible for the action itself. So let's do a little case study here, and this is real. There was a client that had the call center, and they had 250% annual turnover rate. And in call center environments, that's not necessarily uncommon. But it was a problem. Yeah, that's kind of an understatement. It costs money every time you hire somebody and they walk out the door. There was a productivity quality problem, obviously. Nobody got good enough at the job to be good to do it well. And that impacted the services that the center was offering. And obviously, there were strategic risks associated with this. If we don't get a hold of this, not only is there a financial drain, but we're going to lose our competitive advantage. We're going to lose out to competitors. So how did this get resolved or addressed? Number one, they started with that business question. And the business question wasn't, necessarily predict who's going to quit. And but it was, what's going on? Why are people leaving? What can we do about it? Because it had to be actionable. They put together an evaluation plan. Okay, here's the data that we have available to us. Here are the tools that are at our disposal. How are we going to go about figuring this out? And what they decided on was to build a predictive model, not because they wanted to predict the outcomes, but because they wanted to tease out the drivers. So they used some machine learning techniques to kind of classify stayers and leavers and figure out what differentiated between those groups. They did their analysis and they identified during the course of the analysis that, okay, wow, team size seems to be in something that's impacting what's going on here. There's a sweet spot in terms of the number of people that report up to a manager, and that links to turnover, as well as pay. Surprise, surprise. In the marketplace, they took some marketplace data, and they said, wow, we know that if we pay more, we're likely to get much less turnover. So they came up with an action plan that the business could implement. Number one, the business did change team structures, and they settled on around 7 employees per manager. And that required moving some things around, but it was doable. And the other thing with regard to pay, they identified that a certain dollar amount per hour more would probably be the optimal solution, but guess what? That just wasn't going to be palatable. They couldn't afford to pay that much more, so they said, we'll pay $2 an hour more. We'll get some benefit out of that. And sure enough, the result was they started at 250% turnover. They got down to 65% turnover. So they used their data to figure out what was going on and craft an action plan that was feasible. And it had a huge impact, obviously. So what prevents people analytics team from doing this, right? Why don't we see more of it? What's been the biggest barrier to doing this sort of analyses or using this sort of framework in your organization? Is it, again, just getting preoccupied with the tactical? Wow, we just don't have enough time to put the effort into that kind of evaluation chain, so to speak, that whole, this is what's going to drive insights and here's what we're looking for. Is it we're not asking the right questions, or we're not asking questions, or we're not having dialogue with people in the business? We're isolated. We don't get out enough. Is it that we have limited technical resources, limited access to information, to data? We can't do it at speed and scale. So here are some ideas on what we might do to position ourselves better. And it's a journey. And again, harking back to earlier in the presentation, there are organizations in the room that are doing all of these things, and some are struggling to be able to do some of them. Number one is, let's democratize access to data and insights. And you might say, well, gee, Steve, that's obvious, but okay, why do I want to do that? The idea is to create space around your team. If your team doesn't have to constantly worry about delivering reports by email or answering ad hoc questions, if you can get a lot of what your consumers are asking for automated and allow them to self-service, that gives your team more time and space to be able to focus on high-impact issues. The second is develop research, design, and advanced analytics capabilities. That's that technical kind of that capability inside the team. Now, notice that I'm calling out research design capabilities. In other words, getting folks who are well prepared to talk about an evaluation plan and how do we draw conclusions based on this. And this is where that IO psychology person in me comes out. Develop an insight-driven mindset. Looking at the world of data through the lens of what sorts of insights can we draw from this and what's going to be actionable. Framing everything about the question behind the question. So if somebody is asking you, has our headcount gone up over the last 3 years, or have turnover patterns changed? Maybe have a deeper conversation about, I can pull that together for you, but why do you ask? And focusing on that, what is it that the person is after? And it's probably a why question somewhere. And then finally, deliver insights on the issues that matter. That presupposes that you know what issues the business cares about. So the somewhat rhetorical question is, what would need to change in your current model to enable this kind of framework? So I have a call to action. There's some things that might be considered, that might be impactful as you try and evolve your people analytics organization. Number one, what's your overall strategy? Having a strategy, having a plan is going to be key to being successful, because if you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter which direction you head. So what are you emphasizing today, and what should you be focused on? Are there areas where you know you need to spend more focus? What's it going to take to be able to do that? And you might be stuck in the situation where you just have to create some breathing space somehow. Develop that insight mindset. And I think it's an approach, it's a way of questioning everything that you're doing in the team to say, how does this facilitate insight generation? How do we move towards a pattern, a habit of doing that? And then showcase value. If we can deliver value, we'll get investment. But in order to deliver value, we need investment. There's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. Is there a business goal that you can tackle immediately when you get back to the office? Is there one place where the business is struggling where maybe you can do something relatively simple, straightforward, go do a little presentation about it, and get people excited? If we can start showcasing value, then we're going to start getting investment. And if people start asking us for information, like, hey, can you tell me why this is happening? Then you have grounds to ask for investment. And then how do you promote your group, your team, as value drivers and not just order takers? So remember Jordan and the conundrum that he was in? We don't need to tell the business things that they either already know or that they can relatively easily figure out, especially if they had democratized storyboards available to them. We need to show them something that they couldn't find or figure out on their own. We need to connect that to something that they can take action on so that they can drive that business impact. So the question is, are you going to wait for your CHRO to say, I already knew that, or make sure that they never have to say that?